Hi everyone, this is Jesse. My needs assessment presentation is called Mental Health Disparities Affecting LGBTQ plus Youth. In 2021, a rising number of youth identify as LGBTQ plus. This steady increase has taken place because people are becoming more comfortable and feeling more safe in being their authentic selves, in part due to media representation. This population is important to study because, unfortunately, LGBTQ plus youth experience adolescence differently than their heterosexual and cisgender counterparts. On top of the tough yet normative experiences of self-discovery that go along with adolescence, this population experiences discrimination from parents, peers, and other sources. This has detrimental effects on the youth's self-esteem. Hence, youth that are coming out experience higher rates of mental health issues. In examining the mental health disparities that affect the LGBTQ plus youth population, we can identify possible causes and solutions. Understanding this population in regard to the bigger picture means analyzing the reason for anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, how it affects the lives of these clients, and how we as social workers can actively advocate against these policies. Anti-LGBTQ plus policy and law prevent these youth from living safely and happily. For example, folks may not have equal access to affordable health care, or may not have access to a school bathroom that matches their gender identity. My interview questions included: how many of the LGBTQ plus youth that you serve experience mental health issues? What services do you offer this population, and do these youth identify positive adult figures in their lives? So my interviews were conducted via phone, but I emailed the interview questions ahead of time so that they could review it. My first interview was with the executive director of the Addison County Teen Center. They're located right outside of a high school. They provide daily group activities, outings, and meals to youth. My second interview was with the Youth Residential Program Director at NFI, Northeastern Family Institute. This is essentially a group home for teenagers in DCF, Department of Children and Families custody, who have been removed from their biological families and carry on everyday life, school, and whatnot at this long-term residential program. The key findings are as followed. Most frequently occurring mental health issues in this population are depression, suicidal ideation, and anxiety as a result of their trauma. The majority of this population is actually anti-therapy. Some members of this population experience verbal violence. The majority of this population are not supported by their parents. A general strength within this population is their overwhelming ability to build their own supportive community with one another. And finally, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this population is experiencing increased feelings of hopelessness and crisis. So, after my data collection, I have come up with these recommendations based on my key findings. My number one recommendation is that LGBTQ best practice trainings need to be mandatory for all human services organizations. I believe that this needs to be mandatory not just for working specifically with youth, but I found it very interesting that the two organizations that I interviewed, because they're not specific to the queer population, but specific to the youth population, they did not have any best practice trainings. They did not require any staff to do these trainings. So we really need to be reaching out to local organizations that provide them. In my instance, I found out that is the Vermont Pride Center. They do free best practice trainings that go over how to successfully work with this population through their trauma. They do preferred pronoun training, stuff like that. Another key finding was that the majority of parents are not supportive of LGBTQ plus youth, their children. Therefore, I'm recommending parent support groups, peer support groups, because a strength of this population, I found out through my studies, is that they're really able to lean on each other for support. So I think that'd be a great idea. Along the same lines, destigmatization of therapy and normalizing conversations about mental health, because although the youth are comfortable talking with their peers about these issues, they're very uncomfortable talking with a therapist or the idea of therapy in general. And I think that has to do in part with maybe not trusting adults. And finally, advocating for policy change in support of LGBTQ plus rights. Excuse me. So I created this flyer for disseminating my key findings that I emailed to the organizations that I interviewed about the benefits of implementing the best practices with LGBTQ plus youth. And I'll let you pause the presentation to read that here. I put the Pride Center of VT logo in the corner because they run a lot of the trainings in my state. Okay, so finally, my connections with the state organizations helped in knowing who to reach out for my interviews. The majority, if not all, of LGBTQ plus youth experience mental health issues, which is very sad. Organizations that work with LGBTQ plus youth are generally successful in supporting them. And our youth-focused society allows for more supports for youth and less for LGBTQ plus adults. My barriers included interviews being restricted to virtual due to COVID-19. Many organizations did not respond, and more interviews would have helped contribute to more accurate data results. Thank you for listening.